Hello again, YouTube. It's Skylar. Welcome back to my face. In today's video, I'm going to be describing how I overcame some of my own personal challenges early on in my transition, especially dealing with things like anxiety and denial and all sorts of other stuff. So before we get into it, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody that's recently subscribed to my channel. It really does help. And if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing. It really does help. All right. So what do I mean when I say denial? So there are a few different types of experiences that I feel almost all trans people have. And these different experiences can be categorized in what I'll call the trans positive experience and the trans negative experience. Those are just made up terms that I just made up. And I feel like every trans person has a little bit of both, kind of like a Venn diagram, if you will. Now, what do I mean by trans positive and trans negative? Well, I'd categorize it kind of in terms of trans positive meaning like the sense of being trans is great. It's awesome. I love being trans. It's so cool. Everything about being trans is just fills me with so much joy. And then on the other hand, you have trans negative experience, which I would categorize as, oh my gosh, woe is me. I can't believe that I'm trans. Why does this have to happen to me? You know, just on and on about, like, oh, it's so unfortunate that I had to be trans out of everybody in the world. And I think it's important to examine both sides of that equation because personally I think everybody that's trans has a little bit inherent of each side. And it's just how you deal and process with the world around you that going forward, especially after you overcome the realization that you're trans, really helps set you on a path of how you want to handle that. Now, for me personally, I would say that my experience through my transition, especially early on, was heavily trans negative in that I felt a sense of shame. I had a lot of internalized transphobia, which is where a trans person themselves starts viewing negative aspects and stereotypes about being trans onto themselves, and it's very bad for self-esteem. And personally, I feel like that's a condition of the environment of which I grew up in, as well as the fact that I live and continue to live in a very conservative, very small rural community. I would say probably close to like 70 to 80% of people here are registered Republican. It's beyond the point of the video, but I just thought I would show that as a way of demonstrating how my view. Now, I'm not conservative in any way, but growing up and being raised in an environment and being in a community like that, it's easier to understand how some of those negative, the trans negative experience can be kind of internalized and digested by somebody like myself. And so it was very difficult when not only before I realized I was trans, but after I realized I was trans. And there's that in between knowing you're trans and actually transitioning, where I feel like people that have a trans positive experience usually don't have to go through the type of roadblock that I myself went through, which was denial. A person with a trans positive experience in a supportive community and a very open-minded environment and surroundings most likely won't have to face any type of denial when they start to uncover and discover that they are trans. That wasn't the case for me. early on, before I ever started transitioning, in the early stages of coming to the realization that I was trans, all of those negative, internalized, transphobic thoughts started to manifest in the terms of, well, I can't be trans because I don't want to, because I know how society views trans people. I know how society treats trans people. And I don't want to go through that. And so you end up in a situation where, because you so desperately don't want to be trans, and again, being trans is something that you can't change. People are inherently trans. That's just how it is. Transition isn't something that you do, or being trans isn't something that you do. Being trans is something that you are, and transitioning is something that you do. But you can't change the fact that you're trans. It's just a part of the human condition. It's like people that are left-handed, or people that are born albino. It's no fault of their own. There's nothing that they could have done differently, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's part of nature. It's what it is. So, people that are trans they're just trans. There's nothing they can do about it, and accepting it and moving on is the best solution. So for me, once I hit that roadblock of denial, that's where the uphill battle started, because now not only was I trying to deny the fact of the reality that I was trans, it was also starting to work against me in a negative way that was a detriment to my own personal life, in that I was losing sleep, missing work, just a large range of negative personal issues and things to my mental health that were just completely unnecessary if I had been in a more trans positive experience, in a more trans positive environment. I feel like I wouldn't have had those same challenges to overcome. And so when it comes to my experience, and I can only speak for my own self because I'm only me, I wish I could have gone back and kind of overcame that differently, or I just wish that there wasn't denial there. And I know that there's trans people out there that have gone through this similar experiences, which is why I'm bringing it up today. Because it was something that was really challenging for me. And it did delay the progress of me being able to come out and transition, which in hindsight, I wish I could have done sooner. But that roadblock, that denial, is really what held me back. And recently, in more recent years, I've moved towards more trans positive experience. I've been able to see myself in a more, positive way, where I'm not really relying on those negative emotions and set beliefs that originally were there, and I'm starting to move on. But it really shows how insidious transphobia is, in that it not only affects those that are around the trans person, it actually is a detriment sometimes to the trans person themselves. And the denial part of the phase of my transition was so difficult for me, because the harder you push back against it, the more it kind of looks you in the face and goes, really? And you start to rationalize things different, like, oh, well, I'm not trans, I just da 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 da, and you can fill in the blank with whatever. And the new meme is still cis, though, so it's like it's kind of a joke, like, oh, well, I'm not trans, but blah blah blah. But that's a real thing. It's a real thing for people to actually have to go through, where you kind of know that you're trans, but you can't accept that, and so you just can't let it go. And I just wish fewer people had to have gone through the experiences that I have with this trans negative stuff. Because that denial, that roadblock, kind of set me back on my transition maybe 3 or 4 years. I could easily have seen myself transitioning way sooner than I did when I was like 23, 24. But because of that roadblock, because of that denial, it was just another psychological step that I had to overcome, another hurdle that had to be moved beyond before I could reach the place where I felt like, okay, I feel safe enough in myself, I feel reassured enough in myself that I feel like I can now move forward and just accept the fact that yes, I am a trans person, and that my transition is going to be the thing that alleviates most of my gender dysphoria and allows me to just become the person that I really feel that I am, and just start to be happier with myself and my life in general. And so that's really all I had to say today. Again, I made this video because I know there's people out there that may be struggling with their own gender identity right now, or even trans people that are far past transition like I am, and maybe they have the same experience, maybe they have the same types of roadblocks and hang-ups that I did. And it's just nice to know that, this isn't something that's isolated. It's just a real thing. Like, you can be in denial about being trans. It's overcoming that is really what gets you to that next stage of being able to start to really find your own happiness and find your own way. Do I have any advice for how to overcome that denial? No, not really, because I can only speak on my own experiences and how I overcame through things with my own personal, situations. But I will say this: if you are somebody out there who's watching this and you are asking yourself, am I trans? I think the question in of itself kind of gives you a clue. Because people that are cisgender, people that are, their gender identity is exactly the same as their assigned birth at sex, they don't ask those questions. They don't have those inquiries typically. Now that's, obviously there's exceptions for everything, but most cisgender people will not question their gender identity in the same way that a trans person will. So, again, nothing is medical advice. I'm not a doctor. I'm just a YouTuber explaining my own experiences. But I would say if you're asking that question to yourself, you might want to look into that. You may want to explore that a little more. With that said, if you enjoy my content, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing videos. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.